From the News Channel 5 Network, this is SportsLine.
Hey there, SportsLine on your television. Steve Layman here with you. Glad you are here with us on News Channel 5 Plus. Man, we can talk about some things with the Titans in minicamp this week. Minicamp, of course, underway and wrapping up tomorrow. They break for the summer, and then they come back on July 26th, ready for training camp, and then, of course, the 2022 season. And it just seems like the drama of this offseason continues to follow this Titans team around. And today was no different with that. Just from the answers. And frankly, this is the other issue of the offseason, is too often when the Titans have had something they need to clear up and talk about and give us some answers that the fans would obviously love to know, things that those of us who cover the team would like to have a better perspective on to accurately discuss what's going on with the team. Too often when they've been asked those questions, the answers have been even more confusing than the situation in the first place. And we saw that obviously with A.J. Brown and the way things were going and what guys were saying, and then all of a sudden the trade that came with that. We saw that with Ryan Tannehill in his first press conference coming back, with all the questions about why he wasn't there initially when the offseason program started and what he was doing away from the team, and then his soundbite about Malik Willis and the mentorship thing. That, I think, got blown out of proportion, and frankly, the media had something to do with that. We deserve some criticism, I think, for how far that story got blown out of proportion. But here's the thing. Tannehill was here every day over that, and it took like a month. It took like a month for Ryan Tannehill or the Titans to come out and say anything about it. And so this story goes like wildfire. You've got former quarterbacks and Kurt Warner and a bunch of people saying things about Ryan Tannehill that frankly aren't true. But they're saying it based off of the soundbite and the coverage off of the soundbite because nothing was ever clarified. And then a month later, Tannehill talks, sort of clears the air, so to speak, and the story's gone. Why didn't they do that ahead of time? Well, here's another situation. You've got a bunch of guys on this team, more than I can remember, in 12 off seasons covering the Titans. You've got a bunch of guys that have skipped voluntary OTAs. All of them are present and accounted for at St. Thomas Sports Park this week for mandatory minicamp. But one of those guys is not on the field, and that's Jeffery Simmons, a guy who is due a big dollar contract sometime probably in the next year. The Titans have exercised his option for a 5th season, so he's back the next 2 years regardless. But Big Jeff is a big impact player on one of the best defenses in the league. He has the potential to be a dominant force in the league for a long time to come. He is going to get paid. And you would think probably sooner rather than later. And certainly if you're Jeff Simmons, who this season I think is due about $2.5 million, you want that contract to come sooner rather than later. Because we all know in the NFL, nothing is guaranteed. And it's a sport that has injury risk about it. And so if you're Jeffery Simmons, or if you're Jeffery Simmons' representation, which, by the way, we don't know what his representation is. He doesn't have an agent. So you're trying to figure that out as well has been a mysterious piece of this. But you want to get paid. You want to start the process on this contract and preferably get it done. Maybe before this season, but certainly by the end of this season. So next year, you're not on a 5th-year option. You're on the first year of a new mega contract with the Titans. That's obviously what they would like to have happen. So when Simmons doesn't come to any of the voluntary workouts, then shows up at mandatory minicamp but never steps on the field, there's going to be some speculation that it's about him being unhappy with his contract. Mike Vrabel said yesterday only that he was unavailable to be out there. Some other coaches said this morning, Terrell Williams, his position coach, said they've got a plan for what he's doing, and he's doing exactly what they've asked him to do right now. Maybe, but what exactly is that, and why is it the plan? Why is it the plan for Jeffery Simmons, and why is it different than every other guy on the team? That's a fair question for us to ask and for fans, I think, to want to know. Well, today the answers were just kind of mystifying. Vrabel said he's just doing exactly what we've asked him to. I get to decide who practices and who doesn't. It doesn't seem like it's anything about a contract. That's not our deal. Jeff's not telling us what to do. We've just asked him to do this, and everything's fine. That's what he said. Simmons, on the other hand, said, I'm just here to focus on football. I'm not on the field, but I'm here to focus on football. I'm not worried about a contract. Other people, a team around me, worries about the contract. But he didn't say who the team around him really is. It's his uncle, Jason Hatcher, and a few other people. But he didn't say if he has officially hired an agent or not. He said that the team around him has his best interest in mind, and he does what they say. But then he also said that the team doesn't do anything without talking to him and him saying what they need to do. And so he was asked, well, do you know what they're doing about the contract? He said, no, I don't want to know anything about it. But that's right after he just said that the team only does what he tells them to do. He said he's just following the plan that Vrabel and Todd Torricelli, the trainer, had put forth for him and what they want him to do right now, and that includes stuff in the film room and in the weight room and being a leader off the field. Maybe well and good. But they aren't really explaining what the plan is or why there's a need for a plan for a totally healthy Pro Bowl type player when everybody else is on the field right now. Derrick Henry's on the field right now. He's coming off major foot surgery, doesn't have a single dollar guaranteed in his contract. All the guaranteed money's been paid off at this point. So why is Jeffery Simmons different? And why won't they give us the straight story? It was very, very confusing day in trying to parse through that. And so now what you have, as they break minicamp tomorrow and there is no media availability, you have a 5 or 6 week period here where this is the last conversations we've had with Jeffery Simmons and with Mike Vrabel. And so the speculation is just going to grow. Is this about a contract? Is this some kind of a riff between a star defensive player and the team, much like we just saw with a star wide receiver and the team, which ultimately led to A.J. Brown getting traded to the Jets? People are going to talk about that. They're going to wonder about that. They're going to look for answers about that, and they're not going to be coming. Not from the Titans, not from Jeff, not from Mike Vrabel, not from John Robinson. It's going to go. And on July 26th, everybody's going to be wondering, is Jeffery Simmons showing up? And if he does show up, and I expect him to, since that's what he said today, that he'll see us all at training camp and he plans to be there ready to go, I expect to see him there. But if he doesn't have a new contract, is he going to be a very happy camper? That's something that people are going to speculate again about. And so that's going to go until someone talks again, just like the Tannehill thing did, much like the A.J. Brown thing did earlier in the offseason. And one of the other answers that came today that wasn't directly tied to Simmons, but I think it all comes into what this offseason has been about for the Titans. is Mike Vrabel was asked how he feels about the culture of his team today. And he said, I think it's too early to know what the culture is. We haven't had any real adversity yet. And you find out about the true culture when you hit adversity, when you get into the dog days of training camp, when you get into the season and you start to lose, when you face injuries. That's when you find out what the real culture is. And that's true. You can think you have a great culture in May and June and find out when the stuff hits the fan in September, October, and November, that culture wasn't as good as we thought. I remember covering some Titans teams almost a decade ago where that was the case. They had perfect attendance in the offseason. It seemed like they had a great culture of buy-in and want to. And then they got out there on the field in the season, they weren't very good. And it felt sometimes like they were playing out the string in the second half of the year. The culture wasn't very good when they were losing like that, despite the fact that they were doing all the right things in the offseason. But there is something here, I think, when you look at under Mike Vrabel, since he's been the head coach, they've had remarkably good participation in the offseason. They've had a lot of buy-in from guys, and they've had a great culture. Last year you saw it with all those injuries. 91 different guys played in the regular season, and they still found a way to win, and win week in and week out. But this offseason's been different. With all of that stuff, the A.J. Brown contract saga and trade, the Ryan Tannehill off-field stuff, Derrick Henry's coming back from injury, a bunch of other guys decided they would be better off to work out this spring away from the facility, not at OTAs, and just show up when it became mandatory. Jeffery Simmons, one of those guys. Then all of a sudden he's not on the field for it. There's a lot of stuff there. Some might call that adversity. It may not be in the middle of the season, but there's some things there. And so my follow-up question to Mike Vrabel about that, when he kind of brushed aside the culture question, said, I can't know yet. We have to find it in the season. My question to that was, yeah, but you've had all this stuff happen this year, which is uncharacteristic for your teams here in Tennessee in the offseason. Do you have any concern over that right now? And his response, I want to make sure I get this exactly right. His response to that was, and I quote, I don't know why it would be a concern that guys voluntarily choose not to come. This is the coach that talks all the time about the importance of being available, about the importance of being there for the team, and the value that he and the other coaches have in being on the field and instructing and coaching players, being in the meeting room with players. And he literally gave a quote today that says, I don't know why it would be a concern that guys voluntarily chose not to come. Look, they don't have to come. It is voluntary this time of year. And most of these guys are star-level players, and I expect them to be good when it comes to the fall. But this has not been the track record here. And it has not been the track record of a Mike Vrabel team. And now all of a sudden, this has all been part of one offseason. And that's his answer? It doesn't match up with the stuff that he normally says, and it doesn't match up with the things that they preach as a team. All these guys talk about love and brotherhood and all that. The voluntary part should be to show up because you love the team and you love your brothers and you want to be there with them. And you don't have to do it every day. I get some guys maybe don't want to be there all the time. But the numbers this year raise an eyebrow. And then the answers raise another eyebrow. And it makes you wonder, as you get set now for this break where, again, we're not going to hear anything from the Titans other than what they said today and yesterday for the next 5+ weeks. And there's going to be people out there wondering about all these things. Wondering about what the A.J. Brown trade meant to this team. Wondering Ryan Tannehill, the end of last season and this offseason, what that'll mean for his leadership position on this team. Wondering about all the guys who skipped OTAs and if that has a factor on the foundation that was laid this offseason. And wondering now about Jeff Simmons' contract and if he truly is happy with the Titans and if this somehow could be a problem when they come back for training camp. All that's on the table, and it will be speculated and it will be talked about until we get more answers. They had an opportunity today to shed some light on the situation and give us some more information. So maybe there isn't so much speculation about it, and they didn't take it. If anything, they made the situation more cloudy and more confusing. And now more of that speculation and guesswork will happen over the next several weeks. Phone lines are open tonight for you to guess or speculate or talk about things. 737-7767 is the number. We'll take our first break. We'll come back. We'll get to your phone calls. We'll also hear some from the Titans. Jeff Simmons first up when we come back here on SportsLine on News Channel 5+.